Today is Friday, the 12th of June 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. And today we are, wrapping up the week because today we are finishing the advisory board operating system with the fourth milestone, which is the one that I have highlighted here in the model, which is a transformation, reinvention, and what is the edge, what makes your company relevant for the future, right? And the future could be 6 months down the line, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And I say 6 months down the line because the velocity as the things are changing now with AI is a good use, a bad use, you never know, but the things are changing very fast. So let me show you an image also to help to represent today overall conversation, right? So let's look at this image. On the left, is where we move from drag to the right, which is a refeed advantage. And I love this image because actually pretty much represent how many companies feel. And particularly, if you remember this week, I spoke with 40 companies in the US, in the West, in the northeastern coast of the US. Some of these companies are 100 years old or more, right? So it's generation after generation after generation. They hit a ceiling of 10 million revenue from the past 25 years. They are very proud of their work, which is amazing. Though today they should be worth around, or revenue should be around 16 million rather than 10 millions. But anyway, if you're interested in what happened with those companies, you go into my previous streams here on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, and you will see what I'm talking about. But on the left, we see the ship that is still there, but is tired. Yeah, it is patched, it's moving, but not cleanly, right? So it's something that actually is dragging for many, many years. But on the right, we say the same vessel, but has been refitted. It is not a fantasy new ship, it's an improved one. It's the same good material refitted. And that really matters because most founders, like yourself, like a very good yourself, do not need reckless transformations, right? So this is a misconception. So it's not something that you have to change the whole thing. You need a discipline refit. You need to keep what works, remove what drags, and upgrade the parts that the next stage demands. And let's take a look at what this looks like in our model, right? So this is a full model anyway, but we are going to focus on the left, which is transformation, reinvention, edge, and based on brand strategy and performance. So let's go into understand three problems that you're going to find at this stage of your organization. Problem number one is that you, as a founder, stay loyal to the old model because it worked, right? And this is fine, but the things are changing. And this is understandable if you are saying, well, like these companies that have 100 years old. The old model created revenue, jobs, your pride, reputation, but yesterday's strength can become today's drag if nobody's allowed to question it. And question is not to challenge it and to defeat it, to make a challenge like, hey, look what's going on. No, like a good question, a good challenge would be like, for example, as I mentioned, and say, listen, you're very proud. You've gone through many economical changes, technological changes, social changes in the past 25 years, and you managed to get the revenue, or your family managed to get the revenue at the 10 million revenue very steady, right? Ups and downs here and there, but pretty much 10 million. Now, in currency valuation, you lost almost 48% of the acquisition power of 25 years ago. So today you're still in 10 millions, but actually this 10 million the value of this 10 million is less and less and less. So if you want to just to keep, I'm not talking about growing or scaling, just to keep the currency or the acquisition value of those 10 million 25 years ago, today you need to have revenues in the region of 16 to 17 million per year, right? So that is a big problem. So having or maintaining the past today doesn't mean that you are making any progress or you're getting relevant. Probably this is a decrease of your capacity to be relevant to the current markets. Now, problem number two is that that transformation is treated as a project rather than a board rhythm, right? So the business waits for a crisis or competitors move or clients demand or a system failure or succession issues. And then the reinvention becomes urgent, expensive, and emotional loaded. There's a lot of stress there. And again, back to these studies or this conversation I had with these 40 families or companies in the US, you know, which was one of the factors where they push these companies to really reinvent themselves and go through different changes and go for new customers or new industries, a new not a full new industry, just complementary industry. So some people were in pharma and they went into farming, some were into military, and actually they went into OEM for motor factories, etc. Why they didn't do that 10 years ago, and they were forced to do it when the pandemic hit? So they were unprepared, they were struggling, they were trying to find solutions, they went to do things that they never done in the past 15 years before the pandemic, but they had to do it on the pandemic because they were forced to do it. So that's something that you is reactive, and you don't have any capacity to understand what are the consequences of this. All of them survive, obviously, but can you imagine, besides all the stress of the pandemic that nobody knew what was happening, and all of a sudden you have to reinvent your business and try to reach out to different people, different industries, or different complementary industries for your company to survive? But you can design that when the times are good, like now, right? So problem number three is that edge or that innovation gets started or separated from risk, right? So probably you've been in the situation where talks about innovation are in one meeting and controls in another meeting not related to innovation. So you have talked about digital tools without asking whether the data is clean, for example. Or example that would be like you talk about new markets without asking whether the operating model can cope. Or you talk about automation without asking what happens to people, cash requirements, controls, and delivery. And this is another conversation I have with company in the UK, that they say, well, I think that if we go into a more concentrated customers, a larger customer, they will cascade to their customers our software licensing as part of their delivery, right? So we can leave this high volume, low revenue business model that we have. We go to a large organization and they cascade down to all the rest. And I say, that's perfectly fine. Now, have you considered if you will be able to go through the procurement process? Would you be able to go through the insurance requirements? Would you be able to provide all your balance sheet actually match the level of contract that you're doing? Because all these part of the procurement processes of a large corporation compared to doing business with them than selling you directly to the end users. So these kind of things have to be considered, because actually you might have open a new market initiatives, but the operating model or the capacity to deliver is not there yet. So how you are going to get into that position where you can have these meaningful conversations that can make a very, very good progress into your organization, but you take it just simply as a sales effort. It's a whole organization effort. That's why we have this operating model, because it's not just about the revenue or the performance. It's about how you're going to control these, which is a governance risk, which are the risks that your company is running. Do you have enough capital to supply these? Do you have enough people to supply these or to deliver these, right? So it's all part of the business model. And you have to consider all these things when you're designing, for example, just one single effort or sales effort. Now, in other words, imagine the business that is proud of their ship, put it that way, because it has survived heavy weather before, which is fair enough. We cover that. But the hull is patched. The dashboard is old. The crew knows workarounds by memory. That's another big issue. Your people, that they know, and we discussed this largely yesterday. And the next sea or the next storm will not be kinder because you survived the last one, right? Probably will be even harsher because the boat, the vessel, the hull is already tired, right? So you need a retrofit to do it with purpose. So that is not a criticism, by the way. This is a signal. So, as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. Use the advisory board as a place where reinvention becomes safe to discuss, right? So let's pull the full model so you understand what I'm talking about. We have our great image here of the boat, the retrofit, and we have the full model here without the gray area that we're looking for. So the full advisory board operating system is a big loop that it works together all at the same time. So when you're talking about scaling your company, ask whether your brand, your people, and your partnerships are strong enough to grow without you as a founder, as a strain, right? That you're not a bottleneck. You can have all these structures in place, so you don't have this boomerang effect that everything goes back to you because, oh, we need you in this call, we need you to have this conversation, we need you to these approvals, we need you for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of when you're talking about predictability, which is the right side of the model, ask whether the revenue, your assets, and your capital are balanced enough to support that growth, right? Now remember that growth is like a parallel lines where the operating expenses and the revenue increases together. But when you're talking about scaling, your operating expenses pretty much stay steady, but your revenue increases. So it's two different conversations, two different treatments. And when you talk about systems, which is the bottom of the model, ask whether the governance, risk, compliance, controls, and performances are strong enough to protect the business, right? And remember, the performance is not necessarily a KPI. Performance is, we spoke about governance, risks, and compliance yesterday in detail, and performances, where exactly these performances are delivering the controls, the things actually had to be done, the risk that how you manage your risk, and how the things are supposed to do in terms of governance are done, and can you evidence those? So and lastly on the left of today's conversation, when you're talking about edge, your innovation, your transformation, ask whether the strategy is fresh enough to keep the company relevant. And here's a keyword: relevancy. You want to make sure that the company is relevant to, as I mentioned, the next 6 months, the next year, 3 years, 5 years. And this is a conversation that we had with somebody a couple of months ago. And the board was a family-owned business. Everybody in the late 60s, mid-60s, close to 70s. The mid-management was around the 40s. And they say, we've been doing business for so many years. We are very so happy to do what we do. And when I ask how you know that your next generation of customers, they are buying from you in the next 5 years, and they say, well, what do you mean? And I say, well, your mid-management today, mid-40s, early 50s, they have teenagers, and they're going to finish university in the next 5 years or so. They are going to be potentially your next generation of customers. Where they are buying today, none of them. They came back a few weeks later, say none of the children of their own management was considering the company as a part of their purchasing in the future, or even in the current days. So they were not relevant anymore for the future generations. So you can imagine that was a cold bucket of water on their heads, because they say, oh my gosh, so who is going to buy from us? How are we going to sustain this company in the next 5 years if the next generations are not even considering our brand as part of their purchasing habits, right? So you can miss one of these portions of the model, and probably your whole organization start to weaken, right? So if you scale without predictability, you overload the boat, as they say. So if you chase predictability without systems, you trust numbers that may be hidden weak controls, and these weak controls creates further issues. So if you build systems without an edge, without a future, the business becomes tidy but stalls there and probably start to decline. And these companies they have 10 million revenues for the past 25 years, but in current value they might worth 5 or 6 millions. If you chase edge, meaning your innovation, your transformation without scaling, you pretty much create a lot of noise and distractions, like these branding things that they are very quite famous now. Like you've probably seen these posts about the logos, the changes of branding, and many of them they had to come back to the old one because they lose traction with their current customer base. So the advisory board must keep all four milestones alive: your scaling, your predictability, your systems, and your edge. So every quarter, I would suggest you as a founder and your leadership team to answer 4 questions. Question number 1 would be, where are we still scaling through effort? Yeah, where are we? So we are scaling through effort or through a strategy. The growth is adding weight, meaning actually it's dragging, or actually it's making the company lighter and more efficient and more relevant to the market. Are the controls too dependent on trust, or they are depending on a systematization of operating procedures, workflows, a delegation of authorities, etc., etc. And again, if the old model is creating a drag or is helping to propose the company to the next stage. So those questions do not attack the business, by the way. They protect the business. And here's a point where sometimes the owners, like yourself, the founders of the organization, are overprotective of your organization, and you want to have a finger on every pie, but instead of helping the growth of the company, probably you are dragging the company. So a good advisory board also helps manage the emotional side of reinvention. Yes. So as a founder, you often hear change as what you build is wrong, but that is the wrong message and the wrong interpretation of the word change, and have to be placed correctly. So the message have to be calmer, I say. So put it this way: it seems like the model has done its job, right? It looks like, and you can prove that. Also, the business have reached the limit of the old design, because now it's go bigger. You have more than 50 employees, you have more than 10 million revenue. Or if you still have these 50 employees and 10 million revenue for the past 25 years, the old design is not, it's not that it's not working, but what can be done to retrofit this one to make it relevant to the current times and bring it back to 50 million, 70 million, 60 million in 2 years or 3 years time. So that's the next stage where you need to refeed and not a full revolution of the business. That's not a requirement. Actually, if you go a full revolution, probably will be too noisy and it's going to crack the business. It's not really to help. So that's perhaps a much easier conversation to have to go through these questions. So the edge, the innovation, your transformation is a practical thing. It might mean turning your method into a repeatable framework. It might mean replacing manual reporting. It might mean refreshing pricing. It might mean bringing digital tracking into operation. It might mean strengthening climate resilience, right? So with ESG. It might mean building succession options or retiring products or clients that no longer fit. So the advisory board helps decide what matters now, what can wait, and what should be stopped. So strategy is not only what you start, is what you stop protecting, that it doesn't help the organization to grow or be more relevant in the future. Now, let's wrap up. What do you gain working with me? So, three things: business outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of business outcomes, is the business stays relevant without betting the company, right? So you don't want to gamble the company on this. You have to make it very strategically, very professionally, and with a very clear business outcomes to the next 6 months, a year, 3 years, and 5 years. So you get a clear rhythm for decision or deciding what to scale, what to measure, what to control, and what to refit. It's not everything and everywhere at the same time. It's a cadence, it's a process, it's a calendar, it's a schedule. It's very well prepared before anything moves anywhere. Now, in terms of differentiator, is access to an international advisory board built around your current stage. So you don't need to hire one permanent executive for every challenge. You don't need a large consulting machine. You do need to focus the advisory capacity into a faster implementation, lower overhead, and not talent locked in. So you rely in several people instead of one person that might propose to do the whole thing by itself, but probably it's a big challenge because one person cannot know everything. But you have an advisory board, an international advisory board that sees things from many different point of view and provides solutions that are specific for where you're going today and making your company relevant for the future. And also you have the ability to swap these members, right? So it's not the group thinking is avoided there, because you can have an advisory board actually sitting there for 2 years and probably they are exhausted all their resources, their expertises, their capacities. But if you replace these members every 6 months as a company evolves for a new talent specifically for that particular area, then the whole thing refreshes and the whole thing starts to get more dynamic. So your company starts to get more dynamic with a full and very good control of that dynamism, because you don't want this dynamism like explosion, like a bomb. You want a dynamism that is controlled towards something very specific. And that reduces your risk because you avoid the strategic drift where things start to get everywhere and everywhere and every time, but doesn't bring any results. So the business stops relying on instinct, history, and late reaction, and it starts using the external challenges at board level rhythm for a sharper signals of what to do next. And you don't need to know everything. Just the next step is good enough to understand where you're standing, be more safer, and get things done much properly. Now, one action you can take home today, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less. Let me pull the image here. This is our little one-pager exercise of every live stream. So draw 4 columns on a page, and this is pretty much the week wrap up. Scale, predictability, systems, and edge. And at each column, write one drag factor, and then circle the one that, if fixed, will make the other 3 easier, right? So that is your first advisory board agenda. There you are. So they say these are the scaling, predictability, systems, and edge. If we fix this one first, based on what we know today, we'll make the other factors or the other milestones much easier to implement or deliver or refit. So let's pause here today and reconvene next week. And remember, if you are a advisor in your own company, you are a founder, you are a part of the executive team, and you have more than 50 employees and more than 10 million in revenue, and you want to build an advisory board operating system that gives you a sharper judgment, faster action, and lower risk without hiring a full executive team or engaging in a large consulting firm, let's have a 30-minute chat so I can understand where you're coming from, where you are today, and where you want to go. And we can design an advisory board around your milestones that brings 25% revenue increase and 18% more productivity. So have a great weekend.